Alrighty, chapter 12. Oh, it's very echoing here. Hopefully this isn't too bad. Chapter 12. Again, the idea. I'm not very qualified. I'm just trying to learn the material myself, and so I'm making a video of me going through the PowerPoint and looking up things that I don't completely understand and going over it anyways. So let's get started. All right. Estuaries, and that's how I think I'm supposed to pronounce it. It is a semi-enclosed area where freshwater and seawater meet and mix. There is wide changes of salinity, temperature, exposure to air, presence of soft sediments, low species diversities, number of species, but typically high biomass, which is the total mass of living organisms. And so yeah, and I was told that this is a lot of like what's in Mobile, like we have a lot of estuaries, but anyways, so a lot of this stuff is gonna be on the thing. There is, which I don't know if we're gonna, is this on the next slide or whatever? Okay, yeah, types of estuaries. Which I have a little side note here. I'll just go ahead and read it. It says estuaries can be classified into 4 basic groups based on their origins. Drowned river valleys, bar-built, tectonic, and glacier-carved estuaries or fjords. Drowned river valleys. So I think we're going to go through all of those different kinds. Oh, and then, here's another note. Sorry, this one is on page 276. The other one was on 277. But this one says estuaries are partially enclosed coastal regions where fresh water from rivers meets and mixes with seawater, which is what we kind of went over earlier. I'm burning up. Okay. Type of estuaries, we have drowned river valleys, which is the most common type, formed by the drowning of lowland around the mouths of rivers when sea level rose after the last ice age. Example is Chesapeake Bay. Let me see if I can read some more. So yeah, drowned river valley is the most common type. So you see them the most. Drowning of lowland mouths of rivers. Okay. I guess that makes sense. It's just like, it's just where rivers and seas are mixing because of things. Another type of estuary is the bar-built estuary, which is built by the accumulation of sediments into sandbars or barrier islands. Example is coast protected by Cape Hatteras Barrier Island. And this image is a good image, by the way. It is on 277, page 277. The description in here says 2 types of estuaries are found along the eastern coast of the United States. Chesapeake Bay and the mouth of the Delaware River are drowned river valley estuaries. The Cape Hatteras Island from a far-built estuary. So yeah. The next type of estuary is the tectonic estuary. It is formed as a result of land sinking due to movements of the Earth's crust. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. So I mean that makes sense. So yeah, land is sinking, so salt water comes up and mixes with that fresh water, making an estuary. Cool beans. Fjords. They are deep valleys cut on the coast as a result of retreating glaciers. Example is the coast of Alaska, Norway, New Zealand, Chile. And this image is also on page 277, and the description of it says, Milford Sound on the southwestern coast of New Zealand's South Island is a fjord. It is a finger-like inlet surrounded by sheer walls that rise 1,200 meters, which is 3,900 feet, above sea level and plunge to depths of 500 meters, which is like about 1,640 feet. Its entrance is only 55 meters or 180 feet deep. As in other fjords, the shallow entrance restricts the exchange of water between the fjord and the open sea, resulting in stagnant, oxygen-depleted deep water. So, let me see if I can understand this, because I don't. I don't really understand it. Hopefully we'll understand it more. Anyway, I kept on rereading everything. Actually, you know what? I'm going to read this whole thing on fjords. Another type of estuary was created when retreating glaciers cut deep, often specular valleys along the coast. The valleys were partially submerged when sea level rose, and the rivers now flow into them. These estuaries or fjords are common in southeastern Alaska, British Columbia, Norway, Greenland, southern Chile, and the South Island of New Zealand. Large glaciers currently melting faster as a result of global climate change are still found in many fjords, particularly in Alaska, Greenland, and South Chile. I guess, yeah. Development of estuaries. Estuaries are best developed in areas where the coastal plain is flat and the continental shift is wide, which is passive margin. The opposite is true in areas with steep, narrow continental shelves and coastal plain, which is active margins. Let me see if I can explain that better. Flat coastal plains and well wide continental. I don't understand that. I really want to let me see. Let's see if I can look this up. What's the difference between active margins and passive margins? West coast of the United States is an example of an active margin where the coastline corresponds to the boundary between the Pacific and North American plates. A passive continental margin occurs when a transmission from land to sea is not associated with a plate boundary. Oh. So let me see if I can get a good image of this so that I can explain it better. Let's see, active. So passive, it looks like the beaches where you can walk for a long time, and it's still kind of flat and whatnot. Or like it's shallow and you can walk. So steep, narrow continental shelves. So basically, it's saying that like estuaries are best developed from like whenever it's shallower and flatter and bigger continental shelf thing. So yeah, I guess it's I guess salinity. Let me look that up. Let me see if that's how you pronounce it. How to pronounce salinity. Salinity, yeah. I got it right one of the times. Anyways, it's not 35%. I can't remember, or 30%. I can't remember what this little thing means. But -5 to 30, not necessarily percentage, and more, it varies according to distance from seawater tides and freshwater input rivers. Depth contributes to salinity profile. Salinity is not uniform. Saltwater is heavier and sinks below the freshwater as water is brought in by tides, which creates a salt wedge. The image that you see is kind of a pretty good one. Is on page 278. It is figure, oh, well, technically you have figure 12.4, and the description underneath it says the salt wedge in a typical estuary moves in and out with the tide. In picture A, at high tide, the crab is covered by water with a salinity of 35 PSU. B, at low tide, it is covered by water with a low salinity between 5 PSU, 15 PSU. So all of this, it's showing that you have the freshest water here, and then it gets a little, it increases in salinity, and then it's covered completely. This is the salt wedge right here, this little thing right here. And then here it's during low tide, crabs in the same spot. So the low tide is coming in and is covering the crab in some fresher water. And then I do have a little note here that says that estuaries are subject to wide fluctuations in salinity. This one says, adapting to salinity. Organisms in the estuaries are normally, oh gosh, euryhaline? Sure. That means they tolerate a wide range of salinities. Some are osmoregulators, that makes sense, and have mechanisms for keeping their internal concentration stable. I guess that's kind of like being warm-blooded too, like, you know, we regulate our own temperature inside. So yeah. And then the euryhaline, it just tolerates a wide range. And then others are osmoconformers and have internal concentrations that vary with that of their surroundings. So it's like cold-blooded more so, where like their temperature changes with the outside temperature, but that's all right. Their body can just kind of take it all. So those are the different kinds that can make it there. Adapting to salinity. Let's see, where's that image? This image is over here. Okay, before we do that, I'm going to have this side note. It's about substrate. It says, fine, muddy sediments brought into estuaries by rivers settle out in the relatively quiet waters. Bacterial respiration in these organic-rich sediments depletes the oxygen in them. So yeah, just so you know, fun fact. Maybe you should remember that. Alright, so this image is on page 280. It's figure 12.5. And the description says types of species living in idealized estuaries in relation to salinity. The width of these bars represents the relative number of species or biodiversity. So I think this is the soft salinity that they can just take, and then stenohaline marine species, they can take, they actually have to like live in the thick of it. Into the thick of it. Euryhaline marine species can kind of just take it all. What is that? Brackish water species. They can take somewhere between like 2-ish, 3-ish to about 20 freshwater species, mostly at like this 0, kind of stemming out to 15. But yeah, it's just showing like how much salinity they can take. Another image that's on the same page, 280. It's figure 12.6. The description says the salinity of the body fluids of estuarine animals responds in various ways to the salinity of the surrounding water. In a perfect osmoconformer, the salinity of the blood exactly matches that of the water. In a perfect osmoregulator, blood salinity stays the same no matter what the water salinity is. We have drawn the line for an imaginary perfect osmoregulator at 35 PSU. The salmon and freshwater eels are nearly perfect osmoregulators, even though their bloods are more dilute. The important point is not the actual salinity of the blood, but the fact that it remains relatively consistent. Notice that some organisms, like the crab in the diagram, can only osmoregulate within a certain range of salinity. They are osmoconformers outside this range. So yeah, you have a perfect osmoconformer. So it's saying like the salinity of the water, the salinity of the blood. Then a perfect osmoregulator, it kind of it stays completely straight. But we see right here with the Chinook salmon that it kind of stays pretty straight. Like it'll just the salinity of its blood will stay the same in kind of any salinity. Freshwater eels, same thing. It kind of just stays pretty constant. It doesn't matter what the water is, and that's an osmoregulator. So they're regulating their own. They're like, nah, this is how I want it. This is my regular. Then we have an osmoconformer right here, which we have this polycete worm, I don't know, and it kind of is on this line of the osmoconformer. It gets a little wobbly over here, but it kind of just, whatever it is on the outside is what it's on the inside. It conforms to society. And then you see this crab over here for a little bit right here. It is regulating itself. It's like, no, I will stay this way. But at a certain point, it just changes the stuff in its own blood to match what's on the outside if it gets too much. So it just couldn't stay with it. Oh well. Dealing with salinity changes. Flowering plants in estuaries, they expel excess solutes. Salt glands in cordgrass, Spartina, and mangroves. See Fig 12. Oh, also this one's like crossed out. So, or concentrate solution of tissues in pickleweed. All right. Anyways, it's crossed out, so we're not going to spend too much time on that. Substrate. Mostly mud or sand as a result of low wave action / turbulence. Mud is difficult for animals to move through. Mud and sand also shift, unlike hard substrates, which is also a challenge. Particle sizes are small enough that most areas are actually anoxic, devoid of oxygen. So yeah, that was kind of that note that I said a little earlier back. So I guess we're going backwards through this. So in the last chapter, it talked about whenever it's calm and peaceful, it's usually softer and fine things. Whenever it's like more rough and rugged, it's like gravelly and stuff. And then because it's gravel, then sand, then clay. Hold on, let me go back and check that. I feel like that's incorrect. Hold on. I should know this. This is from the last chapter. I know. I'm sorry. Gotta go back and check myself. Oh my gosh, I thought this was closer to the beginning. I guess not. Okay. Oh, I was right. Yeah, gravel is like the most coarse, and the next one is sand, the next one's slip, and the next one's clay. But for this, mostly mud or sand, the substrate is mostly mud or sand as a result of low wave action. Which remember, mud is like a mixture of that slit and clay. So that's like what's on the bottom. The substrate is, and so because there's low wave action or turbulence in these estuaries, it's not going to be very gravelly. So it's mostly just mud or sand. Mud is difficult for animals to move through. Mud and sand also shift, unlike hard substrates, which is also a challenge. So it's kind of saying that like it's hard to live in this substrate that is like constantly shifting and changing and moving. And it says particle sizes are small enough that most areas are actually anoxic, which is devoid of oxygen. So that's saying that like if it's too tight and too tight compact with each other, then there's really no way for anything to move through, including oxygen. And so it's saying that if you do live in the substrate, you will have to figure out how to overcome that, because it's a little difficult. Also, I would like to add this side note. It says organisms in estuaries have adapted to salinity fluctuation in various ways. Ozoconformers let the salinity of their blood fluids vary with that of the water. Osmoregulators keep the salt concentration of their body fluids constant. Let's see, there was another one. Hold on, I want to go back to remember what the other one was. However you pronounce that. But that's this one right here, and that's why it's like, oh, I can just kind of take whatever. Just chill. All right. Yeah, water temperature. Wide variation, especially at low tide, can be stressful in summer. We don't want them to be stressed, poor babies. Anyways. Go back. Estuarine communities. Open water, for the most part. Dominant organisms include plankton, phytoplankton, and zooplankton, and fishes. Many marine species spend at least a portion of their lives in an estuary, mostly as larvae. So these estuaries, I guess, are often like their little baby places. And this figure right here is on page 282. It's figure 12.9. It says the Atlantic menhaden, and I don't want to try to pronounce that scientific name, is one of the most important commercial fishes in the United States. Adult fish, 1 to 3 years old, spawn offshore, and then the larvae drift, which is talking about these buddies lay the eggs, and then the larvae drift whenever they hatch with the tides and currents into estuaries, moving into shallow areas in the salt marshes to grow. So, and this is just showing like they'll go up these marsh creeks, and whenever they're less than a year old, they'll come back out. And yeah, and then they, and so basically like they grow up here, because I would assume it's because it's like smaller and easier for them to swim. And they just kind of like, I guess that they just can't even swim very well, so they kind of just drift into here anyway. So these estuaries are often like little nurseries kind of thing. Water transparency. Very poor. Suspended sediments and particles from rivers in the water. Reduced clarity makes it more difficult for photosynthesis and autotrophs in the water. Most primary production is the result of flowering plants in the salt marsh as opposed to seaweeds or photoplankton. Yeah, I guess, because, I mean, think about it, that the water transparency is very low. It's hard to see through the water because like some particles from the river you just can't see through, and because of that, the light can't shine through, so therefore photosynthesis really can't take place for those autotrophs. So yeah. Salt marshes. Cord grass. Let me see. I don't know if I need a... Yeah, because this has me going through. So let me make this little note before we continue. Wait, what on earth is this? Okay. Well, I have a few notes before we jump into these figures. One note says that estuarine communities are characterized by low biodiversities but high biomass. The dominant primary producers on mudflats are diatoms and bacteria. Most of the animals are burrowing deposit and suspension feeders that feed on detritus, which low biodiversity just means that there aren't like a bunch of species, but high biomass. Let me make sure I'm saying this right. I would think that that's just how many, let's see, someone texted me, I need to text them back. I'm in the second floor study room. But let me try to look back. I want to make sure that I'm not saying something wrong. Biomass. A total mass of organisms in a given area or volume. So yeah, that is high. So it's saying that you have diatoms and bacteria, which diatoms, just to... Oh, they don't have it so I can read it here. Again, I want to make sure that I don't say anything stupid and incorrect. So I would rather just admit that I'm going to look this up on Google right now. Diatom is a type of algae. Yeah. So then most of the animals are burrowing deposits and suspension feeders that feed on detritus. Which detritus detritus in the sediment, which let me also make sure that I know the correct term for detritus. Detritus. Waste or debris of any kind. And so basically these animals are little trash feeders. But yeah, big biodiversity. Then we're going to go to, there's another note now. It says salt marshes, which we haven't really, we are about to talk about salt marshes right here. Salt marshes are dominated by grasses and other marsh plants. Bacteria in the mud decompose dead plant material and contribute a large portion of the detritus in the estuary. Cool. But yeah, let's go ahead and read this. So cordgrass, Spartina species, I don't know, dominates along the water edge in most salt marshes. High primary production. Nursery for young in many species. Ha! I did say estuaries are like nurseries. Oh wait, well this is technically salt marsh, so maybe it's, never mind. Whatever. Contribute detritus to the estuary. So salt marshes. Cause yeah, all these like little grass, like you always see like little bitty fishes swimming in the grass. It's so cute. But anyway, so this figure is found on page 288. It is figure 12.15. It says a salt marsh near Atlantic Beach, North Carolina, as in other Atlantic marshes. The smooth cordgrass, whatever, I'm going to try to pronounce it, occupies the edge of the marsh that is flooded the most by seawater. It is replaced higher up in the marsh by salt meadow grass or salt marsh hay, a shorter and finer grass that is less salt tolerant and can form extensive meadows. It grows where the marsh is flooded only at high tide. Many of these marshes have been filled in and destroyed. Oh no! so sad. Man, we messing everything up. That's what I've been learning. I'm just like, oh yeah, this thing, beautiful, nature, yes, beautiful, and guess what we do? Mess it up. So yeah, that's basically it. Now this, okay, no, this one we have to go back a few pages. This is on page 283. That's like 5 pages back. It is figure 12.11, and it says, the description underneath it says, some representative inhabitants of mudflats and temperature estuaries. Many mudflat organisms also can be found on muddy bottoms outside estuaries. So these are a bunch of cute little organisms. We have moon snail, polymeces, we have mud snail, hydrobia. We have soft-shelled clam, Maya and Renaria. We have ghost shrimp, Neotriphaga. We have bat innkeeper, Yerkes, Kaupo, and quote-unquote guests. And then we have bent-nosed or small clam, which is Macoma. We have sandworm, which is Nervessus, and bamboo worm, which is Clanella. Anyway, and then you see all these like little holes right here? Like there's a bunch of other little bitty bubbies underneath that. Oh, cute, cute, cute. Anyways, it's just talking about some of the different organisms that can live in the mud. Oh, excuse me. And these are the burrowing deposit and suspension feeders that feed on ditches, so they feed on like waste and whatever. Mangrove forest, the one, the only. Woohoo! All right, and I actually have a note of this real quick. Let's go ahead and jump into that. This side note says mangrove forest or mangalls are formed by mangroves, tropical and subtropical trees and shrubs adapted to the intertidal environment, mostly on estuaries. And also that was found on page 288. And now let's just read the slide and go through it. Mangrove trees. They're found in tropical and subtropical coasts, typically replace salt marshes in these areas. High primary production, species-rich community, marine as well as terrestrial species. Protect coast along against wave action from storms. So they're pretty great. They do, you know, replace the salt marshes. So the cordgrass. So if you have these, you can't have these, or you can have these, but then you can't have these. So anyways, but yeah, now we have an image of a mangrove forest, and this is found on page 289. It is figure 12.17. It says aerial view of mangrove forest on the southern coast of Puerto Rico. The outer seaward edge of the forest is dominated at the red mangrove it's dominated by the red mangrove, and there's a scientific name. I'm not going to read that. As in Florida and most of the western hemisphere, the inner margin of the red mangrove is bordered by a broad belt of black mangrove. And there's a scientific name. I'm not going to try to read it outside. Further away from the black mangrove is the white mangrove, which I'm not going to try to read that. But anyways, yeah, it's just talking about, I really can't tell if they just have like a huge, this is just on the southern coast of Puerto Rico. I don't know if there's like a really huge difference here, but whatever. Let's continue. Excuse me. Mangrove forest. Some mangrove species possess pneumatophores, vertical root extensions that help in exchange of gases. Sediments often anoxic. So this is on that same page, page 289. It's figure 1219, and it says this same word. It's this exact word I'm trying to read. Pneumatophores, the vertical extensions of shallow root, obtain additional oxygen in mangroves like Sonertia. Here in Palau, Western Pacific, the species is found along the seaward fringe of mangrove forest. So I guess this helps. So what it's saying is like the tree's roots go into the ground, but the ground doesn't have oxygen, so the roots have to come back up, which is kind of funny. Anyways, let's continue. Food webs and estuarine ecosystems. Oh, I almost had a stroke trying to say that. Let's see real quick what page that's even on. Okay, that's on page 292, although I do want to go over this note that I see before that. So here's a side note on page 291. It says estuaries include plant-dominated communities with very high primary production. Most of the food manufactured by these plants is made available to consumers by way of detritus. Hold on, I didn't understand that. Let me look at this again. I'm going to try to explain this better. Okay, so it's saying like in estuaries there is a lot of plants. And so they have very high primary production. So that means like all these primary producers, autotrophs, they like produce so much. And a lot of the food that these plants make is actually given to different organisms, consumers, by way of detritus. So saying like their trash, their dead stuff, like that's how a lot of them eat. All right, so this image that you see right now is on page 292. It is figure 12.24, and the description says generalized food webs in estuarine ecosystems, salt marshes to the left, occur in temperate regions, mangroves to the right, and the tropics. And I mean, you can just kind of look at it. You have different arrows that shows herbivory, like the green ones. They go all over the place. The gray ones are predation. The blue outline is detritus feeding or export, and then the blue one is contribution to the detritus pool. And as you can see, detritus is kind of being consumed by a lot of things, which detritus, again, is just kind of like the waste-ish. And then the things that are contributing to detritus are kind of at the bottom. But yeah, and you can also see examples. Excuse me, you can see examples of everything right here. So yeah, it's just way different. But this is in temperate regions, and this is tropics. So just in case you wanted to know. Seagrass beds, yay! They can be found in some estuaries if water clarity permits, which you gotta see chapter 13. High primary production, and they help stabilize substrate. I wonder if they have an image of that coming up. Oh no! Let me see if I can find a picture of that and just describe it to you. I'll tell you everything. You're gonna learn everything. Seagrass bed. So yeah, and it's also saying if clarity permits, because remember, like, that usually there's not much clarity in these places. So I don't think there are any seagrass. I don't know if this is even talking about seagrass beds. This is like, in all honesty, this is like out of order from a lot of things. But since there's not a lot of light that's able to come through because it's not very clear, it's hard to have any plants that really, or anything that uses photosynthesis to like eat, to stay alive. They have a high primary production and they help stabilize the substrate. But let's continue. I need some water. Oh my gosh. Oyster reefs. Fun. And this is our last slide. Hallelujah. On page 291, you will see figure 12.23. And the description says, an oyster reef formed by the eastern oyster, and I'm not going to try to pronounce that scientific word, on the Atlantic coast of the United States, exposed at low tide. So they are found in many estuaries, beds of oysters on which many other species grow and thrive. They may provide the only hard substrates in many areas, in many estuaries. So, yeah, cool. So oysters are, you know, all right, I guess. But yeah, that looks like that's the end of it. Thank you so much for watching. This actually helped me a lot. So anyway, have a good day, have a good life, or whatever. Hope you I hope you find a coin on the ground and it's the right side up. All right, bye.